Hi, I'm Zoe. I've got a wild story to share with you. One of those days that starts off normal but ends up changing everything. Before I dive in, let me tell you a bit about myself so you can picture me in your head. I'm 26, born and raised in the good old USA, and I've been living my best life here ever since. I graduated from college a few years back, studied communications, if you're curious, but I traded the office life for the skies. I'm a flight attendant now, and honestly, I love it. So, about me, I'm blonde, golden, sun-kissed hair that falls just past my shoulders in loose waves. I've always been super athletic. I ran track in high school and still hit the gym at least 4 times a week. My body's fit and toned. I'm proud of it. I'm 5'7", with long, lean legs that look killer in my uniform. My chest? Let's just say I fill out my navy blue blouse nicely. I'd guess I'm a solid C-cup. Not too much, not too little. Just perfect for me. Oh, and that day, I was wearing my favorite black lace bra and matching panties under my uniform. Something about lace makes me feel confident, you know? My feet are a size 7 in American measurements. That's like a 38 in European sizes, I think. They're dainty but strong, with a slight arch I've always liked. My toenails were painted white that day, my absolute favorite color for polish. It's crisp, clean, and makes me feel put together, even after a 12-hour shift. I've been told I'm pretty attractive, like, a lot. I've got bright blue eyes that sparkle when I smile, a little dimple on my left cheek, and a laugh that turns heads. People say I've got this natural charm, and I guess I can't argue with that. Anyway, enough about me. Let's get to the story. It all started on a flight from New York to Los Angeles. I'd been working for about 6 months with this airline, and I was finally getting the hang of things. That day, we were cruising at 35,000 feet, the cabin was calm, and the passengers were mostly asleep. I'd just finished serving coffee in first class when I realized I needed to check something with the captain. Something small like a schedule update for our landing time. I can't even remember now. But it was the perfect excuse to head up to the cockpit. I smoothed my skirt, checked my reflection in a tray I was holding, yep, still cute, and knocked on the cockpit door. "Captain, it's Zoe," I called out, my voice light but professional. "Come on in," came the reply, deep and smooth like he'd been waiting for me. I stepped inside, and there he was, Captain Ryan. I'd seen him around before, but up close? Wow. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair just starting to gray at the temples in that hot, distinguished way. His uniform fit him perfectly, and when he turned to look at me, his green eyes locked onto mine. I felt my stomach flip. "Hey, Zoe," he said, flashing a smile that was way too charming for a guy stuck in a cockpit all day. "What's up?" I blinked, suddenly forgetting why I'd even come in. Right, landing time," I stammered, holding up my little notepad like it was a lifeline. "I just needed to confirm we're still on schedule." He glanced at the controls, then back at me. "Yep, right on track. Should be touching down in about 2 hours. He leaned back in his seat, still watching me. "You're newish, right? How are you liking the job?" I laughed, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "Yeah, about 6 months in. It's great. Keeps me on my toes. Literally." I wiggled one of my white-polished toes inside my sensible black pumps for emphasis, and he chuckled. "Those shoes can't be comfortable," he said, nodding toward my feet. "Size 7, right? They look small for how much running around you do." I raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Good guess. Yeah, size 7, and they're not that bad. I'm used to it." I shifted my weight, suddenly aware of how close we were in the tiny cockpit space. "You're tougher than you look," he teased, his voice dropping just a little. "And you look pretty tough." Was he flirting? Oh, he was definitely flirting. I felt my cheeks heat up, but I wasn't about to let him win that easily. "Thanks, Captain. I try," I shot back, giving him a playful smile. "You're not so bad yourself, keeping this plane in the air and all." He laughed, a real warm sound that made the cockpit feel less sterile. "Call me Ryan. And thanks, I've had some practice." He paused, then added, "You know, you've got a great energy, Zoe. Makes these long flights a lot more interesting." Okay, now my heart was racing. I leaned against the edge of the co-pilot's seat, empty since the co-pilot was on break, and crossed my arms, mostly to steady myself. "Oh yeah? Glad I can help. It's not every day I get to chat with the guy in charge. Well, you should come up here more often, he said, his eyes flicking over me in a way that wasn't subtle but wasn't creepy either. Keeps me awake better than coffee. I grinned, feeling bold. Careful, Ryan, I might take you up on that. Please do, he replied, and there was this spark in his voice, like he meant it. We just stared at each other for a second, the hum of the engines filling the silence. I could feel the tension building, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to run back to the cabin or stay right there. Zoe! The co-pilot's voice snapped me out of it as he stepped back into the cockpit, brushing past me. Everything okay? Yep, all good, I said, way too chipper, and straightened up. Just checking on the schedule, I'll, see you guys later. I flashed Ryan one last smile. He winked at me, actually winked, and slipped out of the cockpit, my heart pounding in my chest. Back in the galley, I leaned against the counter, trying to process what just happened. My hands were shaky as I poured myself a cup of water. Captain Ryan, hot, confident, and clearly into me. And me, well, I was into him too. The way he looked at me, the way he said my name, it was like something out of a movie. I glanced down at my white-painted toenails peeking out of my shoes and grinned. Maybe this flight was about to get a lot more interesting. So, after that first little chat in the cockpit, I couldn't stop thinking about Ryan. Every time I walked past the door, I'd catch myself wondering if he'd call me back in. And guess what? He did. A lot. Over the next hour, it was like he couldn't get enough of me up there. Zoe, can you come check something? Or, Zoe, I need your input on this. Each time, I'd roll my eyes a little, mostly for show, before heading in, my heart doing that stupid flutter thing. The fourth time he called me up, I was starting to catch on. Captain, sorry Ryan, what's it this time? I asked, stepping into the cockpit with a teasing smile. The co-pilot was out again, grabbing a snack or something, so it was just us. The space felt smaller every time I walked in. He turned in his seat, those green eyes glinting with mischief. Just wanted to see if you're still as gorgeous as you were 10 minutes ago, he said, his voice low and smooth. Spoiler, you are. I laughed, brushing my blonde hair back. Oh, you're smooth. Does that line work on all the flight attendants? Only the ones who look like you, he shot back, leaning forward a little. And trust me, that's a short list. My cheeks went warm, but I played it cool, stepping closer to peek at the controls, like I even knew what I was looking at. Well, I'm flattered. But don't you have a plane to fly? I can multitask, he said, his gaze sliding down to my legs, then back up. Flying's easy when I've got something this distracting in front of me. Okay, that got me. I bit my lip, trying not to grin too hard. You're trouble, Ryan, I said, turning to leave. But that's when it happened. I must have misjudged the space because as I spun around, I crashed right into him, like full-on collided. My hands landed on his chest. His caught my waist, and for a second we just froze like that, nose to nose. Whoa, he murmured, his breath warm against my face. You okay, Zoe? Yeah, I managed, my voice a little shaky. His hands were still on me, firm but gentle, and I didn't pull away. Sorry, I'm usually more graceful than that. Don't apologize, he said, his thumbs brushing my sides through my uniform. I'm not complaining. His touch sent this electric jolt through me, and I swear my knees wobbled. He didn't let go, and honestly, I didn't want him to. It felt good, too good. You're bold, I whispered, looking up at him. His face was so close, I could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the way his lips curved when he smiled. Only when I see something I want, he replied, his voice dropping to this husky tone that made my stomach flip. And right now, that's you. I laughed softly, nervous but totally into it. Ryan, we're in a cockpit at 35,000 feet. Best view in the house, he said, his hands sliding just a little lower, resting on my hips. And I'm not talking about the clouds. His fingers pressed into me, and I couldn't help it. I leaned into him, my body buzzing from how much I liked it. Every touch was like a spark, lighting me up. Careful, I teased, my voice playful but breathy. I might start thinking you're serious. Oh, I'm serious, he said, and before I could respond, he shifted us. In one smooth move, he turned me around and backed me up against the edge of the cockpit panel. Not hard, just enough to pin me there. Then his arms wrapped around me from behind, strong and warm, pulling me against his chest. I could feel his heartbeat through his uniform, steady but fast, matching mine. "Ryan," I breathed, tilting my head back to look at him. His chin brushed my shoulder, and his lips were so close to my ear I could feel his breath. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, his voice like velvet. "And I will, but I don't think you want me to." He was right. I didn't. It was insane, middle of a flight, passengers sleeping a few feet away. But his arms around me, his body pressed against mine, felt incredible. "No," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't." "Good," he said, his lips brushing my ear as he spoke. "Because you feel amazing, Zoe. Been thinking about this since you walked in here." I shivered, leaning back into him more. "Yeah? What else have you been thinking?" He chuckled, low and deep, his hands sliding up to rest just under my ribs. "How those legs of yours look so good in that uniform. How your voice gets me every time you say my name. How I'd love to—" He stopped, imtha, like he was catching himself, and I turned my head just enough to catch his eye. "Don't stop talking now," I said, grinning despite the heat rushing through me. "You're on a roll." He smirked, tightening his hold on me. "You're dangerous, you know that. Making me forget I've got a plane to land." "Then focus," I teased, shifting against him just enough to make him groan softly. "But don't let go." "Never," he said, his voice a promise. His hands stayed firm, his chest solid against my back, and for a minute we just stood there, wrapped up in each other, the hum of the plane fading into the background. So there I was, pressed against the cockpit panel, Ryan's arms around me from behind, his breath hot against my ear. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it over the engines. His hands rested just under my ribs, and every time his fingers moved, this little shiver ran through me. I couldn't believe how much I was into this, into him. Then his hands shifted. Slowly, like he was testing the waters, his fingers slid down to the hem of my skirt. I felt the fabric inch up, just a little, his touch light but deliberate against my thighs. My breath caught, and this wave of heat rushed through me. It was slow, teasing, and oh my God, it felt amazing. My whole body tingled like every nerve was waking up at once. "Zoe," he whispered, his voice so soft it was barely audible over the hum of the plane. "You're driving me crazy." I turned my head just enough to see his face, his green eyes dark and intense. "Good," I whispered back, my lips curling into a smile. "You started it." He chuckled quietly, his hands pausing as the skirt rested higher on my thighs. Then, in one smooth move, he spun me around to face him. Our eyes locked, and before I could say anything, his lips were on mine. It was soft at first, tentative, like he was giving me a chance to pull away, but I didn't. I kissed him back, my hands sliding up his chest, feeling the warmth of him through his uniform. His lips were firm, tasting faintly of peppermint, and I melted into it. We kept it quiet, the only sounds our shallow breaths and the faint rustle of our clothes. His hands found my waist again, pulling me closer, and mine slipped around his neck, fingers brushing the short hair at the nape. The kiss deepened, slow and hungry, and I couldn't get enough. His touch was everywhere, my back, my hips, tracing little patterns that made my skin hum with excitement. "You're so beautiful," he murmured against my lips, barely breaking the kiss. His voice was a low rumble, sending shivers down my spine. "I can't keep my hands off you!" "Don't," I whispered back, my fingers tightening in his hair. "I like it too much." I pressed myself closer, feeling the heat between us, my body practically buzzing from how good it all felt. His hands roamed again, one sliding up my back while the other brushed my cheek, tilting my face for another kiss. It was slower this time, softer, but just as electric. I ran my hands down his arms, feeling the strength there, and he groaned quietly into my mouth. "You're making this so hard," he breathed, his lips grazing my jaw. "Flying the plane?" I teased, my voice hushed as I nipped his bottom lip. "Everything," he replied, smiling against my skin. His hands settled on my hips, squeezing gently, and I swear I could have stayed like that forever, lost in him, the cockpit, the thrill of it all. But then he pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes serious despite the flush on his face. "Zoe," he whispered, his voice barely above a breath. Whatever's happening here, it's just us, okay? Our little secret." I nodded, still catching my breath, my lips tingling from his kisses. "Yeah," I murmured, brushing my thumb across his cheek. "Just us. I like that." He smiled, this soft, private smile that made my heart skip. "Good," he said, leaning in to kiss me once more, quick but sweet. "Because I'm not done with you yet." I laughed under my breath, stepping back to smooth my skirt, my whole body still warm and alive from his touch. "Better not be," I whispered, giving him a playful wink before slipping out of the cockpit, my mind racing with what had just happened and what might come next. So, yeah, that's how it went down. Me and Ryan in the cockpit, tangled up in whispers and stolen kisses, with the plane soaring through the sky like nothing was happening. After that last kiss, I slipped back into the cabin, my head spinning and my lips still buzzing. I smoothed my uniform, checked my white-painted toes in my shoes, and tried to act normal, like I hadn't just had the most insane moment of my life at 35,000 feet. The rest of the flight? A blur. I kept catching Ryan's eye through the cockpit door whenever I passed by, and he'd flash me that secret little smirk. We didn't get another chance to sneak off. Not that day, anyway. But the way he looked at me said it all. This wasn't over. When we landed in LA, he brushed my hand as we said goodbye, his voice low. "See you on the next one, Zoe." And I just grinned, knowing our little secret was safe, and maybe, just maybe, ready to grow into something more. So that's my story, for now. Life in the skies is never boring, especially with a guy like Ryan around. Who knows what's coming next? Guess I'll keep you posted.